Good morning and welcome everyone as we continue our exciting fellowship learning journey. It's great. Now, as we all know, the JC Inner Power Education Fellowship is about us working together. It's about us working together to design, build and lead outstanding future-ready schools which meet the needs of all students. They're inclusive, future-ready, inclusive schools. As we also know, our learning is framed by the four wins and how we as leaders can recognise, know, ride and harness these winds as they blow into and around their school. We understand by now that the winds come from different directions and importantly, that they bring both challenges and promise or potential or opportunity, if you like. They blow different ways and bring these with them. To help us learn together and from each other, in the fellowship, we've included different rich learning pathways. One of these is what Terry calls provocations. These are a series of videos by world-leading educators which are designed to provoke your thinking, to get your thinking out of you, to make you think in different ways, if you like. This means that they do not aim to give us answers or solutions to what's happening, but rather to shake up our mental models and get us to ask questions about leadership, innovation, change, and ways to conceptualize future school. So showing us new things and different ways to try and get us really thinking. So it's my pleasure today to introduce our first provocation, with the fascinating title of Edupreneurship, Creativity and Innovation. Now, we know these are concepts we've introduced at various points of the fellowship already and will continue to explore, and you've done really well with that. I was just reading some of your connection activities last night about your EBL. Fantastic. Now, this provocation is designed and presented by Ewan McIntosh. Ewan is the founder of a company called No Tosh, which is globally renowned for pioneering collaborative, human-informed approaches to designing built environments, learning experiences, and strategies. No Tosh, and particularly Ewan himself, has worked with schools and other organisations all over the world. Wherever the wind blows, they've worked there, and with leaders in every imaginable position, including with the European Commission leadership teams. Ewan's passion project is that he wants everyone to learn and work in places. He wanted to work in schools and organisations that inspire the best thinking and different thinking. His mission is to ensure that every learner has the opportunity to experience exceptional teaching and learning within enriching environments. So I really think you're going to enjoy this. Sit back, fill a bowl of popcorn, have a drink by your side, get ahead and be prepared to be provoked. Enjoy it.
Hello. Well, I come from Scotland. I'm sat here today in Edinburgh, our capital city in Scotland. Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. And sitting here in this part of the world, it's interesting because most of my time is spent actually working outside my country. And through the work that I've done in over 70 countries around the world with schools, in nearly 15 years on this job, with over 1,000 projects under my belt, I've only had 7 bad days on the job. And a bad day for me is classified as the day you realize that no matter what you do, the people on the project are not going to see through what they started. But 7 bad days out of 29,000 or so is not a bad run. It's not a bad go at all. So the question really then becomes one about what about the 0.5% of projects that didn't quite work? What does it tell us? Well, it tells us, first of all, that making change happen is not easy, Googleable work. And nearly every project that our team do is challenging, but all of them end up in a place of less challenge eventually. And I want to share how. So there is a Chinese proverb: when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. And every day it feels like our schools and communities that we work with are facing fast-blowing winds of change: technological, pedagogical, societal, global, local. We can choose to see these changes as something to isolate ourselves from, a spirit of protecting our learners, protecting our teams, or we can look at that wind of change as changes to embrace, changes to lean into, winds of change to harness, to treat as being generative. We can choose to be generative when it comes to seeing those winds of change arriving instead of battling against them and seeing them as being disruptive. And all of this means that we don't give up on our original vision. In fact, we get even clearer on what that vision is and we see it through. And to do that, there are three crucial keys that we can use. And I'm going to talk about these today. We're going to explore these three interconnected ideas that we as educational leaders can master. And these three are the ingredients of having a vision and doing something with it: edupreneurship, creativity, and innovation. Now, by edupreneurship, we're talking about a form of entrepreneurship within education. Entrepreneurship is often seen as starting a business and making money. And that's not really all that it means. It's about the entrepreneurial thinking skills and attitudes that we bring to the table. So when you think of entrepreneurship within the world of education, you end up with edupreneurship, a little bit of jargon perhaps, but edupreneurship is an interesting idea to help us understand the attitudes, structures, skills that we want to bring to make meaningful, lasting change possible. We're going to look at creativity as well, one of these meta skills, a skill that is part of a group of skills that will never go away and never be eroded really by the things going on around us, essential for us to bring to work. So we need a framework of skills that harness that creativity effectively. And then finally, we'll talk about innovation. So how do you go beyond ideas to actually implement change that resonates with students, with staff, and our communities? So I'm going to start by asking this question, really, and ask you the question and think about it quite deeply. What is your attitude to change? Is it one of excitement? Do you personally see change as an excitement, a distraction from the current planning and schemes from the humdrum of daily work? Or do you see it as a series of problems to solve? Does it perhaps make you fearful? Are you perhaps weary and tired of seeing yet more problems to solve? Or do you see change as a series of opportunities to build new ideas, to reimagine things, to inspire the people around you? And do you see yourself as responsible for creating change? Or do you just see yourself as being responsible for reacting to the changes that other people or events outside your immediate control impose upon you? Schools and communities, like the rest of the world, are facing rapid and sometimes chaotic change. And so our role as leaders is not just to weather these shifts. It's not just to react to them all the time, but it is to harness them and transform that challenge into a more proactive opportunity. Warren Bennis, the pioneer of leadership studies, put it this way. He said, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. So if you want to understand how to actually deal with change, it's worth asking whether you have a clear idea of your own vision for what school should look like. Now, at NOTOSH, we think there are three ways that you form that vision and that you see it through. And it can be summed up with the title of today's presentation, that you need edupreneurship, that educational understanding and knowledge, coupled with an entrepreneurial spirit. You need creativity and creative people who can be generative and see change as opportunity rather than something negative to be dealt with and solved. And creativity is about seeing opportunities, maybe as much as it is about finding problems. And then finally, innovation. We need innovation in our organization, but what does that mean? Is that just about shiny new technological things? Or is it about something actually much simpler? I'm going to tell you in just a moment. So, as I said, sometimes change programs just don't work out. You're busy doing your work, you're getting on with it, things are happening, things are moving on okay. And then something pops up, something happens that stops you being able to make that change happen in quite the way that you thought you could. So I wonder how many of you have been in a leadership position for 2 years or less, because statistically, being in a leadership position for 2 years or less puts you at a very high chance of being perceived as a failure. research by McKinsey says that up to 46% of you who've been in a job for the last 2 years only will be deemed to be a failure by the people around you. Now, it doesn't really matter how you choose to define failure, it's just how people perceive you. Probably because when leaders arrive, they do one of two things. They either do nothing, they observe and take their time, or they do too much too quickly without listening to people around them, and they're deemed to have introduced a change that nobody really asked for or wanted the first time round. So let's take a look at what that means. As I say, edupreneurship is one of these words that may come up. I'm going to summarize it really as being entrepreneurial attitudes in the world of education. And crucially, it is not about you going out and making money with educational ideas. It's not about creating an educational company. It's not about making products. It is about the attitudes, the entrepreneurial attitudes that you bring to work. And so let's take a look at that first up, the idea of entrepreneurship and what that means. Now, for me, entrepreneurship is really quite simply defined as having an incredible focus on what you want to achieve. It's about having good communication both ways, being able to listen and observe people around you, as well as being able to tell people things. And then it's about having clarity about the path towards building that idea and making it happen. And this is not just my opinion, it's visible all throughout the world of entrepreneurship. John Cotter, arguably the godfather of management thinking in many ways, has a fantastic book in the form of a comic strip, in fact, called Our Iceberg is Melting, about a junior penguin who discovers the iceberg on which the colony is living is melting, and then has to work out how to convince the senior management, the older penguins, that indeed there is a problem, when of course they believe there's far more urgent work to be done. And he says that to do this well, you need a singular sense of urgency, a focused sense of urgency. Then you need a small guiding team who can actually work with you to get things done. Then you can decide on what to do. Then you communicate, you don't give up, and you keep going. So it becomes the culture of the organization. And then you flip to Melody Hobson. Now, Melody Hobson is an investor. She's also the chairperson at Starbucks. And the way that she says it, after having some business failures in her time and then getting over them, is that you need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So a senior leader's work is often to work out what hurdle is in the way of my people doing their best work. And then once you've done that, the second part is super interesting. She wants you to take radical accountability. That means that even if it's not your fault, rather than trying to blame someone or say that no one is to blame, you actually say, you know what, this is my issue, this is my problem. I'm really keen now to find a plan to resolve it. And by exhibiting that you're not wanting to blame anyone, lay the blame in anyone's path, you're then able to bring people around to create the plan, communicate much more frequently, and look forward rather than looking back. And then once you've had success, hopefully you can reflect on that. If you've not had success, you reflect and you go back through the cycle again. Well, what's getting in our way? Let's just take ownership of that and then plan. So Michael Barber, yet another education titan, who is behind quite a lot of the revolution in education that took place in the early 2000s in the United Kingdom, in England specifically, but with knock-on effects elsewhere. He talks about only three things. You've got to have bold ambition. So there's a sense of ambition, boldness. You also need that myopic focus that several of the others have talked about already, and then consistent communication. So entrepreneurship and making change happen, introducing new ideas and seeing them through, seems to involve focus, communication, and clarity. And that focus element is something that comes up in one of my favorite entrepreneurs and one of my mentors, David Hyatt, someone you will never have heard of, perhaps. But David Hyatt is responsible for creating some of the world's best jeanswear. And in his factory down in southwest Wales, where they make the world's best jeans, the mantra is very simple: do one thing well, it's enough. Now, Steve Jobs said exactly the same thing, and so did Plato. So you can take your pick. If Steve Jobs can steal from Plato, then you can steal from Steve Jobs and David Hyatt. Doing one thing well beats trying to do everything mediocrely. So what does this look like in terms of a school strategy, for example, that you might lead? Well, when we create strategy, in schools, we borrow from Roger Martin, the professor at the Rotman School of Management in Toronto. He believes that strategy is all about making choices. When you focus on something, you're choosing not to focus on other things. So you're making real choices with a very high degree of focus. And these choices can be divided into 5 answers to 5 questions. Question 1, what do you want? Keep it simple, a simple, clear picture where we can also talk about goals at some point in the future. But then what are you going to do? One big idea, maybe 2, but certainly no more than that. So what's the one big thing you're going to do? Then how are you going to do it? What's the approach going to be? What capabilities do you need? What superpowers do you need? This is obviously people in schools, but it's also your facilities, and it can be cash as well. And then finally, do you have the systems in place to actually make this work? And if not, how long is it going to take to build those systems so that what feels difficult today is possible tomorrow much more easily? So having structure to your thinking like this is really important. You've got to have strategy. Without strategy, it's really hard to lead anything because people don't know what you want. They don't know what you're trying to do, and they don't know how you're going about it. So without answers to these 5 questions, it's very hard to lead anything. You've got to be able to communicate focus. And by doing that, you're able to bring people on. This was a specialist senior educator in Europe who told me this. He said, the head teacher goes out and says all this stuff, but none of it's happening in our school. We're always putting out fires and chasing our tails. So that focus that I talk about is incredibly important. And when we look at some of the most successful schools in the world, you will see that generally they do certain things really well. So they do all the things that all good schools do really well. They're not having to invest a lot of their brain power, a lot of their mental bandwidth into business as usual because they've got systems and good people and capabilities to keep that ticking over. When you look at your school community, you have to ask honestly whether you think you've got all of that ticking over or not. And then they do one thing on top of it. So innovative schools tend to do something which at the time felt innovative. It might feel less innovative with time as copycats come along and learn from them. But Avenues, for example, an incredible set of schools around the world, has become renowned for its interdisciplinary learning. Not necessarily the first, but certainly one of the most unique and maybe arguably one of the best interdisciplinary learning systems in the world. And then you've got the African Leadership Academy is the clues in the name of the school, where leadership is the shining beacon. You could also look at MISC School in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, which is aiming to be, frankly, the premier K-12 school for developing the leadership of tomorrow. You've got Geelong Grammar School in Australia, really well known for their positive education and their approaches to that. And they've become a beacon that other people want to learn from. And then you've got proven education models like Gordonstoun, Scotland, which created the notion of expeditionary learning, created the notion of round square global education. And over many, many decades, it's really just focused on those 2 things. So with many, many decades, you can focus on 2 things, perhaps. If you're short on time, really you want to focus on one of them. So when you start thinking about schools with focus, they achieve far more ambitious ideas far more quickly than those schools who are trying to do several things all at once, which are all innovative and not just business as usual. Andrea Maitreya is an incredible educator and businesswoman who came to us at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020 with a vision. Her vision was for a school, and her school was going to be started in what effectively is a housing development. They had 30 homes in the foothills of Transylvania in Romania and the beginnings of a community, but it was missing one crucial part, which is, of course, a school or a learning centre. And so we set about, as all good projects do, with a blank document, and we started writing. Now, when we do this, the questions that I am asking of a school leader are all the ones that I've just asked you. What do you want? What's the one big thing we're going to do to get there? How are we going to do it? What systems and capabilities do we have? And what you get from doing that after a certain amount of time is what I would call a manifesto, a set of promises. And on the website, when we had done our work, we were able to launch the website, and on it was a page. And the page was in the About Us section, and it was called Manifesto. And this manifesto is the set of promises. Andrea wanted the school to have two groups of learners, children and adults. And so, how was she going to do that? How was she going to engage adults far more in the education of their children than they traditionally are? Well, we came up with 10 promises that she and her team would work towards every day, as long as they, as hard as they could. So, designing learning for children and adults, seeing them as equally as important, learning that makes a difference now for young people rather than learning to do something later on, that it's not just a preparation, not measuring achievement by grades and final exams alone, but also measuring achievement in terms of the well-being of children. And so the school eventually opened 1 year later with double the number of students that was expected. And we also had hundreds of professionals asking to work in the school just in the back of that manifesto. That the promise of what it could offer was the kind of school they wanted to work in. It wasn't the choice of everyone. And we'll talk about choices and the importance of them being distinctive in just a moment. But when you have an opinion about the way a project could run, the way a school could go, you need to share it clearly, succinctly, and make sure that people understand it, and make sure that people understand and believe that it can be realized. And that is what we achieved with Colina Nua Learning Centre in Romania. As Andrea put it, she had an idea, but then working with other people, us in this instance, she was able to translate that dream into a pragmatic set of ideas that could be undertaken and understood by other people. And so, with this school, this incredible school that we created, there's a very simple premise which stems from the world of advertising originally about what strategy's purpose is. And strategy, as David Ogilvy put it, a fellow Scotsman who went to New York and created one of the first big agencies, which I'm sure you may know of, Ogilvy, one of the first big agencies in the world for advertising. He expresses it this way: strategy is sacrifice. So entrepreneurship is about focus. To have that very sharp focus, you need clear strategy to realize it. And that focus, if you don't keep it, means you have no strategy. Let me show you an example. If your strategy and your vision isn't focused enough, I call it what you might call a dustbin lid strategy. So there's our big dustbin lid, and the arrows represent all the work that our people are doing. And frankly, our people can be doing work in pretty much any direction, and there's a very good chance that they will feel they are aligned to what we are trying to achieve. However, if I'm super focused, very entrepreneurial, and super focused on a goal I want to achieve, and I've been clear about how to do it, instead of a dustbin lid, I'm presenting to my colleagues a small 5 penny piece. It's the smallest piece of money we have in Scotland. And when it's 5 pence piece at this stage, some people can see that they are clearly not aligned. They're clearly not working towards our goals. And as time advances, we can see that 3 of these projects are really struggling to align to the new goal. And that's the point where I would perhaps choose to sacrifice them, to free people's time and energy up by not working on these things, because it's taking time and energy away from the focus, from the thing that we are trying to achieve. So strategy is sacrifice. And that means you've got to know what's in focus and what's business as usual. And an analogy to help you think about this is to think about skyscrapers. Everyone seems to want to live high in Hong Kong. The taller the tower, the better. Now, imagine instead that you can't go and live in the top of that straight away. We've got to work on ground level instead. So let's go instead to something a little bit more traditional and a little bit more ground level. And if you think of your school as having 3 stories in it, 3 floors, then we can start to look at these floors as being for different types of work. So level 1 is where business as usual work takes place. It's the routine, automatic work. It's the system. Level 1 is what all good schools do well, almost without thinking, because they've got a well-rehearsed, slick set of systems that just let it happen. So formative assessment happens regularly. Students know where they stand, what they want to do next. Teaching staff collaborate. They know how to teach the things they're trying to teach. They know when to stand back and let students learn and take more control. All your assessment systems are tickety-boo. They work just the way you want to. So level one, business as usual. You almost, as a leader, don't have to think about it. It's more about monitoring it and making sure things are happening as they should. As a leader, you should be in level two. Level two is where a singular, that focused, singular, new, stretching goal, that idea that will become tomorrow's routine, gets developed, and with a small group of people gets worked up to a point where one day it could become level one work, but not quite yet. And then don't forget that on the top floor, you do need some people playing. And level three is where we do prospecting work. It's really important to give people an opportunity to play with fresh, innovative ideas. So ideas that might be useful tomorrow, but we don't quite know. Most of the ideas in level three never make it down to level two. And as a result, they never make it to level one. And it's quite important that the people working hard on level one are not distracted by the shiny new ideas happening on level three, because they are distracting. Those ideas in level three are incomplete. They might not work. They might not add value. We don't have evidence yet, but we need to do the playing with them. We need to do research and development in order to be able to create a new level two, the next bold ambition that everyone can pay attention to. And it's your job as leader to ensure that that work is filtered so that over time you can work towards that ambitious goal. So you've got to know what you've got going on at each level. So currently, as you think about what you communicate to your community as a leader, are you communicating too many competing things to them? Are you communicating too much? Full stop. Really, you want to see what is there that you're currently talking and communicating about that could either go to a research and development group up on the third floor to prospect and do the homework on, delegate the prototyping, the development that informs tomorrow's strategy to people who are enthusiastic and keen to do it? And is there anything that you're retaining control of that really you shouldn't? It should be the day-to-day business as usual for your team. And if you have anything like that, work out a plan to get rid of it down the stairs to level one. Meetings need set up, phone calls need had, people need tapped on the shoulder, asked to take on some of that work perhaps. And this is where middle leadership is so, so important. You've got to have skilled middle leaders who know how to take on that kind of often ambiguous project and turn it into day-to-day. So let's take a look. That was me talking about entrepreneurship for most of the time that we have together. And that's entirely on purpose because the ideas behind it then stem in to our second idea, which was around creativity. And I want to talk about a specific element of creativity. Now, creativity is not a standalone skill. It sits amongst a family of other skills, including the ability to focus, including critical thinking. It's a meta skill. And talking about meta skills would be another talk altogether. But creativity is actually about seeking creative conflict. Creativity is about seeking ideas that don't necessarily match with your own to work out whether your idea can be improved by understanding it. Creativity is also about having high expectations of what's possible and having a discipline in the way that you go about doing your work. When you don't have creative conflict in a team, you end up with a disease called everythingitis. It's where you throw everything into the kitchen sink, and maybe the kitchen sink as well, into an idea and hope it works. Everythingitis happens both when you have too many people in the team contributing their ideas and no editing of those ideas. It also happens when you work alone. So you end up diluting your focus because you've got this idea that everything's got to be in it. I'll give you one example of someone working alone or in a very small team. Matt Mullenweg was the founder of WordPress, a blogging company that today drives about 40% of the world's websites as a management system. But the whole program nearly failed. WordPress version 2.0 was launched December 31st, 2005. Version 3 came out more than a year later, January 22nd, 2007. And Matt Mullenweg called that the lost year because what he did was so much could have been gained from feedback. They could have asked people, what do you think of this? Is it doing what you need? They could have monitored people's use of it and improved the product as a result, but they didn't do that. Instead, he had other features he wanted to introduce. And so he waited and waited and waited until it was perfect. And what he ended up doing was launching a second version of this, but with a whole bunch of features that people didn't necessarily want. And it was a version that did not respond to the things they would have preferred knowing about as well. So he waited a long time before launching the idea, and then the idea wasn't really what people wanted anyway. So that's the danger of working alone or in too small a team for too long. The other danger, and the other way that you're going to end up with everythingitis, is when there is no policing of an idea, but also the team doesn't know how to work well together. So this is research from the Harvard Business Review showing how a high and a low performing team operate. The orange segments show where they are trying to understand the problem, processing the information. The green elements show where they are looking at solutions, and the blue is where they try to solve the problem. And I'll just expand this out so you can see it in a little more detail. The team on the left is a low performing team, and you can see that the trend seems to be that they are looking for solutions way too early before they've really understood the problem, in some cases even taking action straight away. This happens in schools quite a lot because people feel that everything is urgent. Everything needs sorted now, today, yesterday. And there might also be a certain degree of compliance with leadership, a culture of compliance. So if the leadership say jump, you ask how far. And instead, a more successful high performing team on the right hand side would process the information for far longer, and they would leave finding solutions much later. And this means that when a leader says, we need this project done by next month, there would be pushback probably. There would probably be, that's probably not going to be possible. Give us 2 months, maybe 3, and we'll come with a report maybe 2/3 of the way through, but please leave us alone in the meantime while we process the information and start looking a little bit later at solutions. And this is very counterintuitive in a lot of school cultures, but this is the definition of entrepreneurial thinking. Creativity and entrepreneurial thinking might be one and the same in that regard. Now, we explored this idea at Singapore American School alongside a family of other schools. Maybe 6 or 7 other schools joined us for a workshop almost a decade ago now, in 2015. And when we came together, it was with a goal of exploring entrepreneurial thinking and seeing how we could introduce it to schools. And in our heads, I think we thought, well, it will probably work in elementary school, but that kind of thing won't work in secondary and high school because it's too busy. They've got too many qualifications already, not enough time. And what we ended up doing was realizing that the greatest opportunity was in grade 12, the end of high school, when students are at their busiest. This was perhaps the best place to introduce the ideas of creative entrepreneurial thinking. So let me introduce you to an overview of the Catalyst project. The Catalyst project is a program that we developed with the Singapore American School. And it's not something that's done by elementary students, which is what one might have expected. It's not something to be done by middle school students, again, something you might have expected. Singapore American School wanted to show that agency, student agency, mattered at all ages. And so they introduced this at grade 12. And it showed that students, it was based on research that showed that students who had had an internship experience, who had had the ability to collaborate with people outside their immediate school world, performed better at university and in work afterwards. That they learned incredible skills when they partnered with an expert in the field. That they learned skills that are not taught or maybe even teachable in a classroom when they were busy doing these kinds of projects. We built a framework, a very simple framework based on a design cycle that allowed students to have some guardrails on a project that was otherwise very much free in choice. So it began with self-awareness of the kinds of things that they might want to explore. There was no textbook, there was no curriculum telling them what they had to explore or learn. This was entirely down to them. We also encouraged them to have a moment of reflection, to synthesize all their research down and define the goals that they wanted to undertake. And then the educators who created this made sure that there was a solid framework for learning, a project-based learning framework for learning, and also that students were taught the skills of project management. All throughout this, it's not just teachers at school supporting them. Probably more important is the mentor from outside school that they've had to seek. So this involves students getting on the phone, sending emails, writing to gain the support of a mentor from outside the school world in the field that they were wanting to explore before then testing their ideas and actually creating something. And I think that when we think about creativity, very often we think creativity is just creating something. But as you can see from the design cycle, most of creativity involves research, collaborating, networking, thinking things through before actually creating that first prototype, getting feedback on it, and developing the idea further. And so what did students come up with? All sorts of crazy ideas. Some wanted to explore brewing, others wanted to create things with their hands in wood and metal. Others still created products for sale or undertook master's kind of level study or undergraduate level study into an area that they were already interested in. There was a myriad of pathways limited really only by students' own imaginations. And I want to show you this one example as well. This is the impact of a project that on face value looks somewhat unacademic, maybe unambitious even. But this is a dancer. This is a video of her when she was younger. This is a dancer who chose dance as her project. So Lauren Smith's Catalyst project in grade 12, while she was studying maths and all the things that you have to study, was dance. She brought together a group of friends, created a choreography for them and with them, took it to a television dance competition that they ended up doing really well in. And she ended up graduating from school with academic success for sure. But her first move was creating her own dance company in Singapore, where she could mentor and teach young aspiring artists herself. So incredibly ambitious, academically successful, and clearly very creative. And what I discovered recently when I was researching this talk is that she's actually just started her MFA at the University of Michigan on a full scholarship based, I'm sure, on everything that she did since leaving school, not simply the fact that she has a BFA in contemporary dance, that she has a minor in arts entrepreneurship from the University of North Carolina. So she went and did the university thing, but she is also a fellow at the Lincoln Center. She is an American Ballet Theatre certified teacher. She has toured a Broadway production nationally, and she has her own dance studio. All of those things combine to show that the creative program of the Catalyst project actually helped young people like Lauren learn that there are creative pathways towards success, and that success is not defined in a singular two-dimensional way, but actually that young people, given the right opportunity and the right framework, can be creative in the way that they choose to carve out their own pathway. One thing that I think is interesting to consider about creativity, and if you're thinking about developing creative programs in your schools, is that creativity, as far as we're concerned, is only one out of a dozen really important meta skills. Now, we call these meta skills because they are skills that we believe will always be there. We've taken research from about the last 20 years from a variety of sources, both from the creative industries, but also from organizations like the OECD. And creativity sits there amongst three other innovation skills: curiosity, sense making, and critical thinking. But on their own, it's not quite enough. And I think what you see from the stories that I told there from the Catalyst project, communicating and collaborating, particularly with people outside your circle, your immediate circle, that social intelligence is incredibly important. And social intelligence and self-management are two sets of skills that are generally served in school. Universities and workplaces are crying out for young people who have a greater sense of focus, who understand how to collaborate, who know how to take the initiative. These skills need taught. not caught. And so it takes new programs that are different from the traditional curricula that we have taught in the past in order to do that. And creating those programs requires leaders in school to take the entrepreneurial leap and say, you know what, there is a gap in our skills market, and we are going to fill it with a program that we create. So in Singapore, they created the Catalyst program, which I think achieves that very successfully. Having a process and framework for being creative is vital. Another key element of creativity is how you collaborate. And remember this research that says, I think in a world where we are assessed and where assessment of how you're doing is what matters most, you end up with ineffective, low-performing teams like the one on the left, where the emphasis is on producing evidence of thinking. It's on producing solutions, however little security there is in those solutions, however little confidence there is that they're right. Whereas high-performing teams are really quite difficult to assess. The assessment can really probably only happen towards the end of the process, and we need a more subtle attitude to understanding whether a project is successful or not, because in those early days, in fact, for most of a project, it might be quite hard to know whether success is going to be there. And of course, a deep understanding of feedback and prototyping is vital. We do need to get beyond the culture of assessment where everyone feels that every move they make is being judged as being successful or not. Instead of that, creativity and edupreneurship, entrepreneurship rely on prototyping and feedback cycles. Prototyping like this needs to be celebrated to make sure your team trust you. If you're silent about progress, if you don't show any interest, if you don't respond to those emails asking for feedback, then your teams won't trust you. If you do give feedback when it's working as well as when it's not, then we pay far more attention when you give us feedback on a bad day, and we can use that feedback to improve. So there we go. A process for creativity, understanding that it sits amongst a set of other skills that also need developed. We probably also need to create programs that can create room and space to develop those skills. And key is, as a leader, make sure that you're building on your existing successes as you try to come up with your next innovative idea. And that perhaps takes us nicely to our third and final point on innovation itself. Well, innovation is really about being clear on your communication and being clear on your purpose. Communicating consistently was one of the lessons learned from Michael Barber and many of these other experts at the start of our session. And we would say, have one idea, one message that you as a director or a leader of a school communicate well. The best directors of schools on the planet do these 6 things best of all, better than anyone else in the school can do, because this is the fundamental of what it means to be a school director. You're there to remind people of the long-term vision and strategy and to refine it over time. You defend the vision, making sure that teams are working for the good of the school, making sure that teams are moving the needle in their part of the community so that the whole community gets better from it, not going off and doing a solo on their own. It's your job to seek and retain talent. That means that you've got to make sure they come in the first place and that they make an impact on the learner experience and then choose to stay. You can empower people to lead. You can engage the community in the purpose of the school, reminding people again what it's there. And you can be the example, managing your energy and time in the way that you want your community to do the same. No heroes allowed, if you like. Now, all of these, bar perhaps the seeking and retaining of talent, are all to do with clear, consistent communication. But then schools give us as leaders a hard job, because what is it you're communicating? And the easiest thing to communicate should be the purpose of your school. And yet the purpose statements of school are often written in this kind of gobbledygook language in general terms. This is a pastiche of maybe 2 or 3 schools. Our mission is to provide a comprehensive standards-based education that encourages critical thinking, creativity, and lifelong learning. We aspire to blah, 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 blah. The problem is that it's not representing any choice. And remember that entrepreneurship is underpinned by focus with a strategy to achieve that focus. Strategy is nothing but choices. So if we're making a choice, we're saying we're going to do all this instead of the opposite. So let's look at the opposite and just ask me, do you know any school that sets out to try and do this? To provide a limited, standards-free education that encourages sloppy thinking, dullness, and one-and-done learning? Do you know any school that aspires to cultivate a homogeneous group of learners, each out for themselves, who are socially irresponsible and morally callous, instilled only with a passing interest in academics? I don't know one school that would seek to do that, although there might be a couple that unintentionally end up doing it. The point here is no choice has been made, so you have nothing to communicate. So think about your vision statement or your purpose statement in the school, and what's its opposite? And if the opposite is not something that a competitor would genuinely choose to do, then you've not really made a decision. And making these choices is important. Get the purpose right, other choices follow. I love this from James Clear, who talks about choices and decisions being in 3 degrees of magnitude. There are hat decisions, hair decisions, and tattoo decisions. Hat decisions are easy to take because if you don't like the decision, you can take it off, put it back, and try another one. The cost of a mistake is low. So, what decisions are you still grappling with that you should have taken a decision on ages ago? Innovation can't cope with too many decisions. Innovation needs decisions that are frankly easy to be taken and forgotten about almost. Hair decisions are a little bit more complicated because when you take a hair decision, you're going to be stuck with the result and feeling a bit foolish maybe for a few weeks or months, but it's not irreversible. A lot of innovation really sits as a hair decision. You're going to have to invest some time and energy in the idea, but it's not going to it's not going to kill the organization. So again, if you've got hair decisions sitting there, just take them. As long as it's potentially contributing to the area that you want to focus on, you've got it. And then tattoo decisions, they are very painful and very expensive to undo. So yes, you do have to be a little bit more cautious. I would say that the caution is not about spending money or time. It's more about being really clear on whether this idea, this tattoo semi-permanent idea, is going to take your organization in the right direction. And so I come back to the point that I started with, which is you've got to build a clear idea of your purpose, of your vision at the start. This is a well-known brand of furniture and nice things for your house, and they're really clear in their staff manual of what they do and what they don't do. So on the left-hand side, they don't do fancy, but they are functional. They don't do complicated, but they are clear. They don't do fake, they do honest. They don't do dull, they do fun. They certainly don't do extravagant, they do smart and thrifty, surprising, human, cheap, and slightly rebellious ideas. And it's not for the few because it's cheap to buy IKEA furniture, it's for the many. And it's not from anywhere, it's not a generic brand. I think that an IKEA anywhere on the planet is still a very Swedish experience that you have when you go around it. So developing that sense of who you are and who you are not is incredibly important. There are a couple of ways that you can do this. One is to build your own set of promises. The way I do this, and a good example would be from my hometown in the west of Scotland. I visited the nursery there, the kindergarten, who were a little bit challenged by an inspection they had. And one of the reasons was they had lost their way. And so everyone came with an artifact, something concrete that represented what was most important to them and represented the secret sauce of the Clyde Cottage Nursery. And then they told a 90-second, 2-minute story about that. In meantime, I listened to everything they said and I created their promises. What they were promising in telling me these stories were certain things that mattered a lot to them, that relationships matter, that imagination needs nurtured, that learning happens when we least expect it. And so we've got to make room for learning when it happens. And the outdoors matter a great deal to us. And we put all this in a kind of good looking set of posters that they would be able to display around the nursery. And that's exactly what they did. They used them also as self-assessment, putting post-it notes that caught people doing good work so that they could share with each other what was working well at the end of every day. And the nursery managers also used the manifesto promises as a success criteria to catch people doing great work and then writing a report on it every week so that they could then feed back to staff on, this is the kind of practice that we want to see more of. Pretty much immediately after the session, the atmosphere in the nursery changed from one of negativity and maybe low aspirations and low expectations to incredibly high aspirations. They absolutely passed their next inspection with flying colours and have done incredibly well out of it. One of the key things that they did was listen. And the power of listening cannot be underestimated. Taking time with your team to listen to what they think the organization could do next, where they think the school could innovate, is vital. Now, it's really important that when we listen, we do it in a visible way. So when we do this in schools, we get post-its out, we create what we call a project nest. We do this digitally using tools like Miro as well. The important thing is people need to know that they've both got an opportunity to speak and be heard, and that they've got an opportunity to listen to what other people say as well. And this is super important because it lets people know that you've heard. But then the reality kicks in, and this is our conclusion, and it's a good old one from Stephen Covey, which is about your time and energy of your organization being so limited. Time and energy is limited. And education is particularly good at finding reasons for not doing things. Teachers often feel that they have little or no influence over things that constrain them. And because they concentrate on that circle of concern that they have no influence over, that circle of concern merely grows. As Stephen Covey put it, when you focus on all the reasons you cannot do something, you end up increasing your circle of concern. Robin Sharma has an expression that I love: what you focus on grows, what you think about expands. So let's not focus on things that we have no control over. If we observe what other people are doing, if we synthesize what they are doing and what looks like trying ourselves, if we spot the golden nuggets of promising practice on level 3 in our schools today, then within the expertise of our own school, we're able to increase our own circle of influence. By only focusing on the things that we have control over, we can actually eliminate the things that we used to perceive as holding us back. So, as a conclusion, when you're leading, and we could take a lesson from Seth Godin, the marketeer extraordinaire, as a leader, you can create conditions where people choose new actions. Their choices are voluntary. They are made by people who see a new landscape, a vision, who see new opportunities, who see new options. You cannot make people change, but you can create the environment in which where they choose to. That is entrepreneurship and edupreneurship summed up. It is creating an environment, and that's why creativity is so important. But it's not creating an environment for them in isolation from them. It is creating an environment with them, co-designing your ideas, co-designing your strategy, co-designing the vision for change is how you actually make it happen. You should never have to look for buy-in for a project, because when you co-design things, everyone was involved from the very beginning. So as a summary, edupreneurship, creativity, and innovation, they end up being so closely tied together, it's hard sometimes to split the difference between them. But there are some practical things you can do. First of all, audit your strategy, audit your focus, do one thing well. Second, make sure that you're doing all the business as usual work well already. If you're not, then maybe rather than focusing on innovation, you need to focus on getting business as usual ticking along nicely first. Because when you've got a solid foundation, you can build innovative ideas on top. Work out what level you are playing on. You should be operating on level 2. Your teams should feel empowered to get business as usual better and better every day, but you don't need to meddle in it. And have you got someone on level 3 prospecting the new ideas for tomorrow? Do you work in a team to develop your strategy? Do your teams really generate ideas together? Do they take feedback? Do you have a culture of feedback where the boss can receive critique from the most junior person in the room? And if not, maybe that's a routine you could start in your meetings. Do you show teams how to operate effectively? Do you have norms of collaboration that let people know they should not solutionize, coming up with a solution far too early on, that they should take their time and come up with a solution when it's right? Do you build on your successes? Do you have a success wall of previous projects and every current project stems from it? Are you getting rid of decisions quickly when it's a hat decision or a hair decision? As a leader, you should be invested on the tattoo decisions and making sure that you take the best bets you possibly can. Know what it is you want and get focused and specific on it. Communicate it consistently, one idea, one message, and then make sure that people know to direct their efforts towards it. And then finally, listen. Listening is probably the most important aspect of this completely. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to this. I hope that you're inspired to lead, to have a more entrepreneurial spirit with your colleagues and maybe transfer some of that entrepreneurial spirit to them. I guarantee if you do it, you're going to see more creativity and you're going to see more fresh ideas emerging from within your own school. You won't have to go looking at Singapore, Romania, Scotland, or anywhere else. The innovation, the ideas that you want to develop are probably sitting under your nose right now. Have fun above all. This is a fantastic journey that you're on. There can't be a more exciting position to have at the moment as you lean into your winds of change, as you generate ideas from them and create a bright future for all your students. Thank you.
Oh, that was a lot, wasn't it? A lot of depth in there, a lot of information, lots of new and different ideas, but a lot to take in such a short time. But please, never mind. We will leave the provocation video up on Moodle so you can access it anytime you want to look at it again, or you can mark spots that you would like to see again and return text for those. So you can watch it again no matter which way the wind blows. And even if the wind is not blowing, you can get on and do it. Now, in your squads, I hope at some stage you can enjoy discussing what you found interesting and provocative in Ewan's talk, and you could get through that Scottish accent okay. And please don't forget to share your main point or the main points of what you got out of the provocation for your school under Connection Activity 5, CA5. We'll really look forward to seeing. Just remember that it was about edupreneurship, creativity, and innovation. What are the main points? What did you get out of it specifically for your school and for your context? So off we go. I actually had 2 or 3 bowls of popcorn during it, so it must have kept my attention there as well. Enjoy going through the discussion with it, and we'll meet up again soon. Bye-bye.